Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Googling Justice presentation. Nice to see all of you. I know we're in the home stretch of the afternoon. Looking forward to a lot of questions. So please keep track. We'll save those for the last 15 minutes, we hope. We really want to make this session as practical and impactful as possible. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask any super detailed question. We love it. Our speakers today, we can maybe go down the aisle. Maybe let's start with Sam.
Make sure my mic is on. Can everybody hear me? All right. I'm Sam Harden. I'm a program manager with PBN. I am an attorney and computer developer on the side. I'm not sure what that means, but that's kind of what I do.
Hey everyone, I'm Sally Chaffin. I am the Associate Director of Community Education and Grants at Atlanta Legal Aid, and in that job I am in charge of the statewide website for Georgia, georgialegalaid.org. And then I'm also Kristen Verrill, who's not here, unfortunately. She twisted her ankle. What did we decide? Saving a child from a burning building.
Burning high-rise.
A burning high-rise, so she couldn't be here today. But
Hi everyone, I'm Jared Marcotte. I'm the president of the Turnout. We are a business intelligence consultancy in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's where it's legally set up, but we're also a very distributed team with folks from Arizona and Utah currently in the audience, so nice to be here.
Yep. And I'm Margaret Hagan. I'm the Executive Director of the Legal Design Lab at Stanford Law School. So great to see you all. Could I just do a quick raise of hands? Who here works at a legal aid, nonprofit services organization? Anyone work for a court or judicial organization? Great. Anyone work for another kind of city government, county government, federal government agency? Ah, okay. Foundations? Any for-profit startups, vendors, consultancies? Great. Nice to see you all. All right. So our goal today is to give you overview, research, and strategies about how to improve the impact of your websites online. And really the big goal is improving the online ecosystem that can serve people who are dealing with some kind of justice problem. Ideally, the web will live up to that techno-optimistic promise of being a place where people can find services, rights, empowering information that will help them use the courts, use legal aid, solve their problems. So that's the big picture we want to start off with. We know that so many people have these justiciable problems. We know that from the justice needs surveys. We know that from other research. And we also know from other research that people are increasingly turning to the internet, in particular to search engines and also to social media platforms as their starting point for trying to make sense of a problem that is happening to them, to see, is this something I should even do anything about? What are my rights or my options? That maybe in past generations that was a neighbor or a family member or a coworker or boss or a trusted institution. And still people do go to those other places, those starting points, but the internet is increasingly a point where people start this journey. So what could happen as people go on a search engine or go to a social media site to begin seeking help? Ideally, in the ideal world, what we would love to see is that these platforms or the sites or other places they're sending people to could help people diagnose this crazy, messy thing happening to them as a legal problem with a name, with context, how to talk to a lawyer or other professionals about this thing, but help them with that understanding and diagnosis. The other thing we could help, that we wish that the internet would do, is make sure this person is aware and well connected to that network of services in their jurisdiction that can help them with this problem. That they know what the next step might be, what the phone number, hotline, text-in number, website that could help them and make that smart next step on their justice journey. And ideally that will feel easy and seamless, low burden. And underneath all of this is this building of legal capability, that ideally that search engine result or that website will make a person feel more knowledgeable about what this thing is, how to deal with it. It'll make them feel more confident that they are able to do some part of it, even if they don't want to do it all themselves, that they feel more confident going on this journey, and they build a little bit of skills that they can kind of diagnose some things, make some strategies, maybe fill in forms, have an intelligent settlement conversation, that the websites can help do all of these things. But whether these realities, whether diagnosis or connections to services or building capability happen or not, really depend on two big areas, and we'll talk about both of those areas today. The first is what we in this room can do with our websites and our SEO strategies. So if we can get people to come to our websites and what content and tools we give them once they show up. So those of us who work at legal aid groups or who are in charge of websites, we have a lot of power to put out really good services and information and hopefully achieve those outcomes. The other factor that really is at play is what those social media and especially search engine sites decide what to show people. What their algorithms say, what their manual processes say, what to deliver to people who enter in certain search terms. So we'll be talking throughout today about strategies that organizations can do themselves on their websites to hopefully improve people's justice journeys, and also what policies we need to ask from those tech companies to change in order to improve their algorithms and their service delivery. So here are things that are in the power of a legal aid group or a court or other group who maintains a public interest legal help website. You can aim and take many of the steps we'll go through today to make your site more discoverable. That's about being near the top of a search engine result page, that more people are finding your website when they're putting in a common term, that you're reaching a large part of your target population, and that you have a lot of other sites, whether it's attorney general sites, local government, mayor's offices, state government, law libraries, law schools, all directing back to your website. Second, content, and this has been talked about a lot at the conference already. Do you have content on your website that match people's needs and presented with the keywords and titles that people use? And are you putting it in presentations people actually want to engage with? FAQs, snippet-friendly presentations that Google might show directly on the search results page, and in plain language. The third and fourth goals for your own website can be about good design, clean layout, great navigation that people can follow, minimizing the clutter, helping people actually tune in, focus, and engage. And the fourth part is the reliability of the technology, that your sites are up, that they don't have downtime, that there's very few bugs, that they're fast and mobile friendly, and that you're communicating to search engines, and we'll talk a lot about that, putting markup and other things on your site to make sure that search engines know who you are and what content is on your site. So those are things we can all work on to improve and hopefully achieve some of those good outcomes. But right now, the research I've been doing at my lab has been doing thousands and thousands of Google searches using an automated audit tool. And what we're seeing is for most of these queries around eviction, domestic violence, debt collection, and post-disaster fraud by a contractor, when we run these searches and see what pages are actually showing up for people, public interest websites are underperforming. They are not near the top or very often on the first page of results. What we see is that the sites that are dominating those search results pages for those four content areas, Nolo.com, usnews.com, creditcards.com, incharge.org is technically a nonprofit to help with debt collection, but overall, the sites that are most frequently showing up when people search online are not court sites, legal aid, or law help sites. So right now, just from the broad picture, and I can give you the full paper if you want, public interest sites are hardly at the top. We know that that first result is actually really key in what people choose to click on, very rarely in the top 1 or top 3 positions, and very rarely even on the first page. We also find that search engines, meaning Google, are showing people information from the wrong jurisdiction. And the sites and the content that most people searching online right now are being connected to are short, what I would call content-farmed articles, usually written by someone who wants as many visitors to their site as possible to show them ads or to upsell them somehow. But it's kind of no jurisdiction-specific content, low actionable content, kind of short generic articles is what most results are. So this is why I'm really passionate about it. There are strategies that we'll be talking about that legal aid, courts, and other nonprofits and government agencies can be doing to connect people better with help online. Before I turn it over to Jared, I'm just gonna make a plug. Our lab, with the support of the Pew Charitable Trusts, has a website full of these details and strategies and also rankings of websites from across the country, legalhelpdashboard.org. And I'll refer back to this at the end too. But if you can flag that and maybe return if you want to do some of these strategies, a lot of this content is on there as well. So let me turn it over to Jared to talk about structured data and court information.
Afternoon, everybody. So, like you heard earlier, my name is Jared Marcotte. I'm the president of The Turnout. We are a business intelligence consultancy, and we define that as the early parts of business intelligence, where we look at process modeling, we run workshops around it, we do legal framework analysis, data standardization, data analysis, and process improvement. The reason why I'm talking to you today is we wanted to work on this Find My Court project in partnership with the Pew Charitable Trusts. And we feel ideally positioned to work on it because we have a background working on national data standardization and aggregation projects. The most famous of which is the Voting Information Project, which started initially as a partnership between the Pew Charitable Trust and Google to help expose information about elections to everyone. And that was standardizing the information at local election offices and then moving that up into places where people look for information online, like Google, Bing, newspapers, other places that could essentially take that information and show people where they vote, what's on their ballot, and how to navigate the elections process. So, to frame the Find My Court project, we noticed that people were going online to look for court information, like Margaret had mentioned, and are not finding information that is really relevant to them. We also found out in the course of this project that court and legal aid offices are sometimes collecting the same kind of data to aggregate court data information at a state lookup or possibly at a legal aid agency as well. And maintaining these data sets is extraordinarily difficult. And the courts are aware of the first problem. There are some great online sites out there to help people find their court. Illinois has a site, Find Your Court. The appellate courts are shown here in the pins and the state Supreme Court. And there's a patchwork of colors that basically outline the different circuits and districts across the state. And you can dig into this map in a number of different ways and look at the filters down below. And when you actually find a court that you're interested in, there's a nice summary page that talks about the kind of court it is, links that are important, and the resources that are available at that particular court page. The website is fantastic. I think when we talk to the folks in Illinois about this, the best thing about this project isn't actually the website itself. They had a fantastic feedback group that was made up of lawyers, staff at the state courts, staff at the local courts, members of the public that basically took feedback from the website and decided what is the information that we want to continue to promote here? Is there additional information we can get? How do we get it? How do we maintain it? And so that was an excellent addition to the website that I think may be even more important than the website itself. California also tried to provide a website, didn't have a map to begin with, but a very simple lookup that started with a city or zip code, and would then present you with the courts in the area. And the greatest thing about this website is really, it seems like everything about this website is an educational moment. So for the matter served, appeals, records, criminal, family, probate, there is a link next to it that says, what does this mean? And so they go into exactly like what does matters served mean? And provided in a user-friendly
accessible way that really talks to people in a way that I think they understand. And also, I think one of the most important questions, can I file where I live? And again, they try to provide this in really plain language. Can you file where you live? The answer is definitely maybe. And I think that this is probably the best explanation you can give that would probably make everybody at the state courts comfortable in terms of a response. But is having a website enough? And I'm sad to say that probably the answer is no. And I think Margaret can make that point better than I can, but it seems like there is a growing body of evidence that people ending up in a search engine may never actually click through to what would actually really help them, the website that they should be going to, as opposed to the information they find online. Take the Moultrie Courthouse in DC. This is one of my favorite results from a search. If I wanted to figure out what I needed to do at this courthouse, I don't think I could figure it out. I definitely could find an address for the courthouse. I know it was constructed in 1975, and if I'm an architectural buff, that's great. If I'm not, I know at least it's a 3.3 star courthouse. So we wanted to bring our approach to this, which is we need to find out how this data is maintained and managed. We want to decide what are the commonalities that we've seen amongst the courts that we're talking to and identify common terms and data points, and then figure out a data standard in which we could supply to them so that the data could be tagged, found by Google, by crawlers, by anyone looking to scrape the information and actually pull it together. So we always start with a process model. And I apologize that the PDF didn't quite make the transition from the PowerPoint I was working into the Google Slides. But I'll post another image in Whova later. But essentially this, if you're not familiar with business process model and notation, it's basically a flow chart with added benefit of actually understanding like timing, communication channels back and forth between two different entities, one of which we obviously can see the process on and one which we can't, which you can see up top is the local court. And this essentially outlines the steps of the process and the systems that it potentially connects to. And we're looking at how data gets collected, how it gets decided on, how eventually it gets into production. So throughout this project, we were looking at different courts, and different courts have different languages. But we needed to find some common language to decide how to talk about everything. And we're honestly just standing on the shoulders of giants here. We looked at the NCSC court data standard, we used the Legal Design Lab taxonomy, and we tried to merge that in with the schema.org tags to find some way that we could talk to courts about how to tag this language up on their website. And if you wanted to go, this information is available right now, and I can post the link, or you can download the slides later, and you can see all of the information that's there. And there's essentially instructions to go from the definitions all the way down to JSON LD, JSON link data that you can put on your website so that this data can be pulled off. We also created a data scraper, and this was supposed to be an animation that actually showed the data scraper working, but trust me, it works. Just believe me. And there is a GitHub account, so you can go and check it out if you are so technically inclined. And it's a simple website it's a simple application that essentially you give it a list of URLs. If the data standard is available, it goes out to look for it. It downloads the data. Right now it goes into an RDF data store, but it also downloads the raw data as well. So if you don't want to play with an RDF data store, I don't blame you. You can also just parse the files for yourself. Now, I love open data projects, and I love open government open data projects. And I have not encountered one that hasn't had challenges since I have started doing this work. I don't even want to say how many years ago. So I won't. The data points relevant to courts are not immediately included in schema.org. We had to do modifications, and we have proposed those modifications.
mention schema.org.
Schema.org is basically a list of tags and metadata in which you can incorporate into your websites to allow Google to understand the relationships between the entities on your website. It's huge and sprawling and defines everything from businesses, business transactions to now courts, or we hope anyway. There is some court information in schema.org, but just not enough to cover our particular use case. So one thing that we found that was lacking in schema.org was accessibility for physical buildings. This has been an open issue in schema.org, I think before 2014, and there is still no solution for it. I have a lot I could say about that, but I won't today, just for pure kindness at this point. We did also have to put in something about an area served. Like, how do you define how a court sits within a court system within a state? So that was a modification we made, including adding matters served. What exactly does a particular court building do? And we also noticed in our work that entrances sometimes close during different times or different issues. One issue we found out was that there were some courts that actually closed entrances for COVID reasons, and so only one entrance was actually accessible. And just knowing the right entrance can mean whether or not you make it on time for your court hearing or not. So we thought that was important. Also, services available. When you get there, is there Wi-Fi? Are there translation services? Is there a self-help kiosk? Those were also important tags to have. And like Margaret mentioned, we need Google to surface this information in a useful way to the public. Just putting up the year the building was built, or maybe even just the hours, is not enough. There's also techno-organizational challenges. I've talked with a number of people here that are in the court system that have had issues editing their own website because it's not managed by them, it's managed by an IT team that might be in a different organizational structure, and you end up having to get onto their queue of development work, which may end up putting the timeline out much further than you want. And the technical bar to implement this is pretty high. If you're not familiar with schema.org and you're not sure exactly what implementing these or adding these tags to your website will do for you on Google, it takes a bit of reading, it takes a bit of getting used to, which is also the reason why we tried to add how-to guides on how to do this. So my ask here is that I hope that everyone here could be a champion for this project and getting courts to publish this information, to actually put the information they put out online, actually just underlie it with the schema.org tags so that it becomes more useful to everybody. Because honestly, better data and more exposure to official data is better for everyone. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Jared. All right, let's go hear from, I think we'll start with Sally, right? So let's zoom into a legal aid use case now. Great.
I apologize. Okay, let me situate myself. Okay, so what's the point? That's just a general question. No, what is the point of having a self-help statewide website? I think for those of us who work in legal services organizations, we don't need more business, right? We're not trying to drive users to our organizations. At Legal Aid, at Atlanta Legal Aid, we get 100,000 calls every year. We can take 21,000 intakes, and just a fraction of those we can provide extended services. So our self-help website, the idea is to provide information to those people that we can't touch. Like, we can't help get them the information in a way that they can access, they can find, they can understand, and then they can hopefully solve their problem themselves. And if they can't, then they know that they need to then contact Legal Aid, or they can understand what their issue is. I think, as you were talking about earlier, just understanding, is it a legal issue? What is this? So, we think there are also other benefits to having a up-to-date, what we think is good content, self-help website. We want to be the authority on poverty law in Georgia. We don't want people to get to somebody's, law firm website and then go there and get swindled. We want them to know, we want them to have the information for free, and we want to be the authority on it because we are the authority on it in Georgia. So that is the point of having website. Advocacy, we get a lot of media attention, every time we're in the news, they're linking to our self-help website for information, articles, videos, etc. So having a robust website is very important for that. We're also able to, through our website, disseminate really urgent information. There's a change in the law. There was a really quick, people could get cash assistance, and we wanted them to know. So part of this was using our banner on our website. This sidebar shows up on every page somebody goes to. So maybe that's their issue. They know it's on our website. We also used other ways, social media, et cetera, to do that. But this is like one way to do it because, thousands of people come there every day. So as I said, we're just trying to get people to understand information. Like, we're not trying to sell them legal aid. And that's the point of trying to increase traffic. We just want more people. We want to get the information in the right hands. So I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we have done at Atlanta Legal Aid to increase traffic to the Georgia Legal Aid website. And I will say from the outset that I am not an SEO expert in as I think probably a lot of people who are managing websites. I'm a recovering attorney who just really trying to get out of it, but who got hired to write content and ended up managing the website as part of my job. And so everything that we do and everything that we've done kind of going, since I started going forward has been with the idea in mind, like, what is our capacity to do changes? What changes can we make with our staffing, with our limited expertise, and what is sustainable? So I know there are many more things out there that we could be doing and that would be effective, but I also know what our capacity is, and it's, half time of my job. So I think everybody, you have to be aware of those kind of things. So I will say that nothing that we have done has, shot up our search results. We've been around for a long time. We have a pretty consistent, we have a big organic, almost all of our traffic comes from organic search. So it's hard to kind of move the needle on that. So some of the efforts that we've done, we added metadata and keywords. We began, through a TIG grant, we made video content in an effort to increase traffic to our website through video content. We ran social media ads for those in hopes that the social media would drive traffic to our website. We are a law help website, and so we worked with them to do some customizations to the law help, the design refresh. So we have a new modern website. So hopefully when people come to it, when they see it, it looks authoritative. This is kind of an analog one, and I'll talk about each of these, what we did and what the results were. We did a marketing push, just like a good old fashioned talking to our community partners saying hey, we have this brand new website. We've updated all of the content and it's beautiful now. So come, link to us. Here's all the resources. Here's how you use it. We did that. We also added schema markup through a TIG grant, and we added just a ton more video content to the website in a lot of different areas. So the first thing we did was adding the meta keywords and meta description to every topic and subtopic on our website. And I did this using a keyword search. I used Google Console to look at what our queries, what people were searching to come to our site. And then I also used, I apologize that it looks like I'm looking at my phone, but I have my notes on here. Answer the public, to look for questions that using keywords, you can then find questions that people are searching. And so I did that, and the results were that I thought it was going to be all exciting. It was my first thing to do to like increase SEO, and nothing. So we actually saw a dip in our site usage. I don't think it's because of that, but none of these things are, oh, it didn't help, or I can't correlate some of this stuff. We're always tinkering, we're trying new things, but that didn't move the needle for us at all. The next thing, we created a series of 1 to 2 minute explainer videos on topics that were related to our website content. So just really short, here's what you need, here's the issue, here's what you can do, or here's where you can go to find that solution. And we linked them to our website. We then ran a series of ads, boosted them on Facebook and Instagram, and because that's where our clients are at. They're on Facebook mostly. And that didn't help. It didn't do anything. I mean, also it did increase our social, we can see that we got more traffic from social media, but it's such a small percentage of our traffic. It's 0.6% of the overall traffic we get to our website or from social media referrals, that it's just not worth the money to do those kinds of things. So it may be worth the money for other things to get information out there, but to drive traffic, it wasn't effective. So I will say that it did help us in some ways. Like we did get, it was a great fundraising tool. So a lot of organizations and law firms that fund us really like these videos. I make them in Lumen 5. I don't know if you've used that software. It's very easy for somebody who is not tech savvy like me. And they look nice and they're easy to make. You can put out something very quickly that is, especially if you need like an urgent issue that needs to be out there. So that didn't help. So then we did just a good old fashioned marketing push. And I will say that this, for our Spanish mirror site, so we were telling people, hey, we have these beautiful new websites. We had also, through another TIG grant, we had completely translated all of our content into Spanish. So we were saying our Spanish site is totally updated. It's an underused resource. And that we reached out to community organizations that we knew were working with Spanish populations, and that was the biggest increase we saw. We have had almost 50% more users, and that has maintained. There was a spike, and then we have gained more users just from that push, just getting that knowledge out there and getting it to people who can then talk to people who will use it. So. Also having buy-in from our staff was huge, right? So I think a lot of people know, like if your attorneys, if your staff doesn't think your website is authoritative, doesn't think it's useful, they're not gonna use it or recommend it to clients. So we really had to do a big effort on buy-in from our staff because our website for a while, we did a content refresh and it was, had been not super usable for a long time. So we kind of had to do a marketing push to our staff. So that was helpful. It was helpful. This is the other, we increased videos on our website. We have over 50 new videos. They're all 1 to 2 minute explainer videos. And I don't know. The answer is I don't know for sure. But in the time we have increased our video content, we have seen a trend upwards in all of our metrics. More users, more impressions, more click-throughs. So also I would say 6 of our top 30 resources are now videos, and they're pretty brand new. So I think that is saying something, like Google is showing people our videos. Hopefully, I think. So, and then the last thing we did, and I think the biggest thing that I can look at directly this, we implemented this day, and now in between that we have seen an upward trend, is we added schema markup to our website. And that was also through a TIG grant. And that was with, or is now available on all Law Help websites, and Sam's gonna talk about that. But I will say that we compared 4 months before, 4 months after, we compared year to year, we compared, looked at a month-to-month trend. And through all of those, we were getting more total clicks, more impressions, and our position was lower, right? So we were better positioned. Our click-through rate didn't improve, but it wasn't worse in a meaningful way. So it's like 0.2% or 0.2, yes. So I think that overall, that combined with the video content are probably what have helped our website the most. So, here are a couple of the tools we used. This will be available if you guys want to, if you don't want to use any of those. And here's some things. We talked to a consultant, like a very brief, just like, hey, here's our goals. Can you give us a couple tips? So we didn't have anybody come in and do anything for us, but we said, hey, we have a very small budget. Can you give us some tips? It was a firm called Attorney Sync. They were very helpful. And basically they looked at what we had, what our capacity was, and we're like, yeah, you should not be focusing on Facebook ads. You should be looking at SEO options that are easy to do for your staff. So things like adding internal links, optimizing your H1 headers, which I think are things we all know we need to be doing, creating a backlink plan, and those are all things that we will be doing in the future, but have not done yet. So just because of our abilities. So Sam is going to talk about schema.
Hi, everybody. I am Sam Harden. I'm going to talk about how to implement schema markup on Law Help sites. But I also want to talk about, can everybody hear me okay? It sounds really weird up here. Maybe I just sound weird to myself. How many people work on a statewide legal information site? A good number of you. How many people use the Law Help platform? Not that many of you. How many people use Drupal? A few of you. How many people use WordPress for any site? WordPress for any site, your agency site, Wix, what's the other one, Squarespace? Okay, so all of these website building tools have some sort of SEO capability sort of built in. For WordPress, the biggest plugin that's used is called Yoast. Anybody use Yoast? Yoast is really good. Yoast will let you see how your page does SEO-wise. It's kind of based on internal metrics. If you haven't used Yoast, I really recommend it if you run WordPress because it's a really good tool. For the Law Help system of sites, we didn't have any sort of built-in, ready-to-ship plugin that lets us deal with SEO. And that's kind of how we had to approach this project on implementing schema.org. We kind of had to take this from the requirements up and build it how we needed it. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So how to do it. And this should be applicable as well to other sites. I've included a link at the end to the documentation about how we did things, kind of the decisions that we went through, the JSON structures. JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. That's a really, really bland way of saying some data that exists on the internet that a machine can read. How we did that, how we structured things, and the choices that we made when we did it. Oh, I went too far. So we started with georgialegalaid.org. I don't know why it got cut off. If you need an indication of my skill level with slide decks, there you go. So we started with georgialegalaid.org because, that was our primary partner in this grant, kind of fleshing out their requirements, what we could do based on the content structures that we had with Law Help, and what was available with schema.org that made sense, that we could kind of fit things into, and how we were going to do that. We've pushed it out now to all the sites in the Law Help network, so it's available and running on every Law Help site automatically. When we implemented Schema, we had to look at the different structures that were available on Schema. Has anybody looked at schema.org, the website? There's a lot of structures on schema.org. It's mind-boggling, the level of detail. You can even get down to things like step in a recipe for something. I mean, it's amazing the level of detail that you can get. So we kind of had to do a lot of just browsing through schema.org, trying to see what's available and what parts fit in what other parts to see what we could actually accomplish and what made sense. And this is the preliminary structure that we came up with. And I give these things with, the caveat, that's what's there now and running. We always want to improve what we do. We always want to make improvements and try and stay current or even ahead if we can on stuff like this. So if you have any suggestions, hey, you should think about doing this. Schema's huge. Please come talk to me. So for the homepage, we use the website schema.org structure. And then here I gave an example of georgialegalaid.org as their homepage. And I'll click on this and hopefully it works. Oh, that got really small. So you can see on schema.org, it lists all of the available parts of a schema structure for a web page. You have things like what it's about. Is it accessible? Is the access mode sufficient? I mean, it's, there's a lot there. So we had to go through and figure out what actually worked for us. And again, this is my skill with slide decks. So there we go. And then on the right-hand column, this is the JSON file that we used. So this is the actual thing that exists on the georgialegalaid.org website. This is the data that Google is supposed to kind of eat, for lack of a better term, and do something with. And you can see, there's a lot of just text there, and, you'll see different terms, different things like that. A note, every lawhelp.org uses a taxonomy called NSME, the National Subject Matter Index, coding of legal problem codes. So that's what we had to work with, and that's what we're sending through to this schema.org in different structures to try and tell the search engines, hey, this is what the site is about. And for Law Help, it's what the administrators of the site choose, not every topic that's available, but which ones they make available on the site. Let's see if I can get back now. So you can see it for homepage, topic page, subtopic pages, and that's kind of how Law Help is structured. And then we went down to the resource page level. So for georgialegalaid.org, they have pretty much all original content on that site. There are some legal aid information sites that do a lot of linking to external content, but Georgia Legal Aid has all original content on the site, so there's a lot of information there. And for article, that's feeding through to the schema what that particular resource is about. Resource is what we call the individual pieces of content. For organization pages, every Law Help site has a directory with listings of organizations and then the details about those organizations. So you have things like the organization phone number if they have one, their address, languages spoken, do they have an accessible entrance, what hours are they open, things like that. So we're trying to feed that information through to the organization listing. Currently, we're not feeding everything possible through to the organization listing simply because there's so much information. And, one concern that we had was, is this going to, start ranking higher than the organization webpage itself? We haven't tested that theory yet or had any, feedback on that, but that is a concern that we had in doing this project. So here's what we wanted when we were doing it. We wanted this to be dynamic. We didn't want it to be static. And by static, I mean something that isn't living and doesn't pull from the database of the site. When an administrator adds a new resource and tags that with subtopics, we want that to automatically populate the schema for that resource and feed it to Google when it scans that page. We wanted to make use of enhanced features that Google makes available. Has anybody ever Googled like a recipe for anything? You see those recipe cards that come up? That's an enhanced feature that Google makes available that you can take advantage of if you run like a recipe blog. Nowadays, every recipe blog has a 500-word essay before, before the actual recipe. But Google gives that recipe card formula, and those recipe blogs after the 500-word essay feed that information into Google's enhanced features. We also wanted to make use of breadcrumbs because that was natively supported on LawHelp, and that's another enhanced feature that Google lets you send to itself. That string of this page came from this page and this page. So you can see like the path when you look at actual search results. And we also didn't want to overcomplicate it for administrators. Those of you familiar with the Yoast plugin know that you can do things on Yoast inside a WordPress page or a blog post, and it'll give you like a red light, yellow light, green light. We didn't have that on LawHelp, and we didn't want to complicate things for the site admins. So we wanted to make it as seamless as possible and pull from the information that's already there in the LawHelp database. Some of the plans that we have for the future, and these are, kind of open, and we're, exploring things as well. We want to add 2 additional schema or rich result structures. There's an FAQ rich result structure. That's that Google enhanced structure, and I can show it to you. So has anybody used this rich results thing and kind of explored that? I highly recommend doing it because it's really, really interesting to see what Google is letting people do. This FAQ module, I think, pairs really well with the way that we can think about structuring legal data on these sites. And, if you've ever Googled how to replace a shower head, you can see a how-to guide or an FAQ guide, on Google itself and the steps or the answer to a frequently asked question without ever leaving Google. My kind of personal conspiracy theory is that one day we'll never leave Google. We'll just, ingest all of the information that Google feeds us right on Google. But for the time being, we want to give people information where they're looking for it. And as Margaret pointed out, people are using Google as a triage system to look for legal information. They see the Google My Business listings for legal aid, for law firms. They see what Google feeds them as far as results, and they read the summaries. That's how people look for information. So we want to make sure that we get the right information to the people when they need it, when they're looking for it. Let me see if I can go back. We also want to use the how-to guide that I also mentioned. The how-to guide is, like I said, it's a step of, or a series of steps of how to do different things. And we're exploring how to match this up with the content structures on LawHelp and let admins say, I want this to be a how-to guide, I want to send this to Schema, and then, let Google have that appear in the search results. Some of the tools that we used, Google has a rich results test validator that's really super interesting. And I'm going to go there. Has anybody used this, the rich results test? Again, I recommend you use it. So I'm going to put in georgialegalaid.org. O-R-G. I got to get the URL. You paste that and see what it says. Hopefully it works. Never do a live demo. I'm going to learn this lesson one day. Maybe today. All right, so one valid item detected, and this is the site link search box that it found. So it says it crawled successfully. And one of the features that we are putting in is the internal search feature. So if you've ever Googled for something and then a page comes up and you see the little internal search bar that pops up, we've enabled that as well to come. I have yet to see it come up for a law help site personally when I've Googled things. I'm not sure why it doesn't show for me. Maybe it's just me, but every time I check the schema, it's valid. So if you want to see how your site is doing, you can use the site link search box, or the rich results test. Also the schema validator, you can feed the schema validator either a URL or the actual source code of a web page if the schema is included, and see what's valid and what's not. To test out what we were doing with the specific law help items and the specific law help pages, I spent a lot of time taking the existing code of a law help resource, handwriting things in JSON, putting them in there with that code, and then feeding them to the validator and seeing what I got right. It was not fun, but it works. And that's kind of how we, how I had to troubleshoot things and see, can we validate this? Can this work? How are we going to do this? I also recommend, if you're going to embark on something like this, especially if you're not using WordPress or Wix, if you're using Drupal and you're looking at what can I do, maybe a good code editor, because if this is in JSON and that's what you're feeding it, you need to make sure that you have correct JSON and the little curly brackets match and things like that. And a good code editor will let you know that. Oh, yep, so this is my last slide. The documentation for what we did on Law Help, there's a link in the slide deck. You can also scan the dinosaur with your phone and get that. If you have any questions, you can always email me or talk to me afterwards. So thank you.
All right, so I'm going to close us out before I turn it over to Q&A with just some takeaways and some thoughts. Oh, one more slide from Sam. So get your questions ready because we will be coming around with a mic in a few minutes. But before that, just some takeaways. In addition to the resources, the strategy list that Sally shared, the Find My Court Ask that Jared shared, the schema.org markup resources and strategies that Sam shared, at legalhelpdashboard.org, we have kind of the indicators that you can be measuring yourself against. You can see your site we've done ratings of the technology performance using Google's Lighthouse of almost all the public interest websites around the country, so you can see how your site is ranking and how to improve that technology piece of it. And you can also, we have a tool to make your own schema markup, so you don't have to go into a JSON editor, but you can just fill in a web form and it spits out JSON code that you can copy and paste into either the header on your website or into one of those plugins. So you can make your own schema markup without any code at all. And we have some how-tos if you're on a WordPress site or a Drupal site, how to get that markup about your organization and your site onto your page. And also lots more if you're like, what is the schema.org and why do they keep talking about it? There's like plain language versions of what it's all about. So we encourage you to come visit the site. Also, we have a monthly meetup called the Legal Help Online Cohort and a Slack group. If you're interested in joining that and talking more about these geeked out things around SEO and placement. So the other thing is to really think about people who don't come to your website. So if in the past 20 years or 30 years now, the website has been the main way that people get what you're trying to give to them, we are quickly moving to a future, especially with ChatGPT and all the pressure that's putting on Google search to change how people interact, that maybe in the next 10 years or even 2 years, it won't be a list of 10 results, but what Google search result might show to people is something that might be an interactive chatbot or keeping them on google.com rather than handing them off to a various list of websites. We need to be preparing for that future. Just like when you search on Google Voice or Apple Siri or Alexa at home, you're not going to a list of websites. You're getting a snippet. You're getting this enhanced result, whether it's a FAQ that's been pre-programmed, a list, or something that that search engine has scraped from the web. How can we make sure that public interest, legal aid, or court content is sourcing what Siri is telling people, what Google search is showing in the first half of its page, what Alexa is saying back? This is all about investment in the structured data. So yes, please build great, readable, well-designed websites, but it's the investment in the data that is represented in that back-end markup, that schema.org markup, in that Find My Court markup. That's gonna be what makes sure that our content is showing up and being told to people. And it also will get us higher to that search results list. And the third thing, and this goes back to one of the points I was making at the beginning, is there's only so much that we can do in the room as administrators of websites or the people writing the content. We can try all those SEO strategies. We can make our headings better, use the keywords, put schema.org markup, but we're living on platforms that private companies are in control of. And those private companies are people, they are teams. They are teams of policymakers, of VPs, of search engine engineers, and some content people. They're not legal help or justice sector organizations, though. So there's a lot to be done with meetings, convenings, gathering the problems and presenting it back to those teams of engineers, VPs, and the people who are setting the policies of what Google search shows to people. Because much like in the election space, there's ways to make that search results page better and get a lot more real estate for that good, crafted, structured content that's coming from a reliable source, rather than ads, rather than whatever group has the best well-funded SEO strategy. So the more that you have use cases or examples of where Google search is going wrong, showing misinformation, scams, low-quality misinformation, that is ways that we can bring that back to those search teams and the VPs and pressure them for policy changes. So I'm very happy to talk more about that, but just knowing that those things are changeable, especially if we're well organized. So yes, let me open it up for Q&A. David, you have a microphone to go around. Raise your hands and we're happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, this is, I guess, a question for Sam mostly, but maybe everyone. With all the schema.org stuff, and maybe you answered this, I apologize if I missed that part of it, but how much of that data that you spent, I know, a lot of time getting in there, would you say Google's actually using and actually displaying in search results? That's my, and that also goes to some other questions around schema and other topics here. It's like putting all that stuff in, like courthouse amenities or things like that. Is it actually going to show up in Google? And if so, when? Is it an arbitrary Google thing? That sort of thing.
That is a great question. That's a great question. And I say it's a great question because, you know, Google is to some extent and at some point kind of a black box. When you feed it information, you don't know really what Google is going to do with it. Like I said, we have the site search feature enabled in schema.org, and it is valid in the rich results test whenever I test it. But it has yet to show up for me when I Google georgialegalaid.org. I don't know why that is. There's no, like reason that Google has given me why it doesn't show up for me. So, it could have something to do with, just time, and Google pinging that domain over and over and seeing it's there a number of times. But to my knowledge, and Margaret, maybe you can answer this a little bit better, Google doesn't explicitly say, if you do these things, you're going, like, we guarantee you, like, you're going to rank for evictions in Georgia as number one. They don't do that. So it's, it is kind of a black box. Margaret, do you have any?
So I think, what does Google show to people? The problem we usually typically run into is, oh, it's so personalized and I can run anecdotal searches. What do we know about what Google's actual policy is and how its algorithms are treating public interest versus commercial or other problems? That's why we've been running these massive search engine audit studies, borrowing from strategies in the political news space. We saw at Northeastern University, they were running massive tens of thousands of searches in 3 days from different zip codes to see what kind of political news information Google was showing to people. We collaborated with that team to then run those searches about legal help searches. And now we're starting to do that on a regular basis to basically see if Google's policy is shifting. And the main policy shift that we want to see is akin to what's happened with election and voting information and medical information and some other civic areas. That instead of the algorithm being let loose, and that's Google's general policy, is to let its algorithm treat every domain of problems and queries the same, unless you can convince them, like elections or like health information, there's a big enough risk of misinformation, bad actors, or low quality information harming the public, causing them monetary harm, physical harm, or something else that meets their policy concern. So that's why if we can show that there are harms being created by that general algorithmic treatment, we can start to get some of that policy baked in, where it's not an arbitrary algorithm deciding what to show people, but there is a team within Google Search who is listening to this community about which sites are more authoritative, what kind of information is helpful or harmful to people, and then they're either curating distinct pages and snippets or drawing from the more authoritative sites. But that takes a policy shift and basically restaffing inside Google. So that's something we're working towards and very happy to talk about more. Yeah.
So to add one thing that I think is kind of funny and interesting, one of the top Google searches that works really well for law help sites is how to get out of jury duty. Do you have any content on how to get out of jury duty?
No, but it is
Really?
one of the top searches on our site.
Yeah, that's nowhere in Schema, by the way, but that's there. So like Margaret said, they're having to run almost like just continuous research on what Google is doing. So, at the end of the day, you can do the best practices, but ultimately it's up to Google to kind of reward you for that.
I will say that the more of us, the more websites that are on the same standard, that is definitely leverage to get some of that special treatment. To show that there's coordination is a way to get your industry, your problem area, to be of interest, because it just shows that there's data standards that they can draw on and feel that there's something to rely on. That's what the medical community did, is they organized around standardized ways of presenting health content.
This question is for Kristen. I'm just wondering if you guys have tried Google Ad Grants and if that made a difference.
Well, Kristen's not here, but Sally.
Sally.
You're
I'm
Sally or
sorry.
Kristen as well.
Could you repeat your question? I apologize.
I was just asking if you've ever used a Google Ad Grant because they're offered to nonprofits for free and if that made a difference for you.
Before I worked there, yes, they did, and we've had some issues getting our website validated to us, and so that we can use it. So that is something that is just that we have not had the capacity to actually go in and tackle. So I know that other people have used them. Has anybody used them and found good results? I don't know.
AC Core Health has one. Well, actually, the Arizona Bar Foundation has one for all of our websites, and it's probably a third of the visitors. Yeah.
Yeah.
set up the Google ads and somebody with the time to actually make the ads that fit what Google wants, once you set up.
Yeah, we hired a consulting firm to do that for us. And the way we got validated was actually the Arizona Supreme Court is the one that sponsored the grant.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was one of those things that's just not in our capacity right now, my capacity right now.
Charlotte, did you have a question? Or,
Yeah.
Amanda?
So my question is more about our strategy together as a civil justice community. So I know that during COVID, y'all at Stanford created a specific unified website for housing matters for people. I'm just wondering like what the results of that were, and was it a better strategy for getting people information because you have more control that way, or is this distributed effort acceptable too?
Yeah, so just background, we had created with the support of the Pew Charitable Trust a website as of May 2020, Legal Help FAQ, and the main goal was to communicate the changing moratoria, eviction protections across the country. So we had a network of legal experts, but the goal was one national platform that would answer the frequently asked questions about eviction moratoria starting in May 2020, and it's still live. The main goal there was in direct response to a Google search team where we said, there's no quality information in every jurisdiction. It's a different agency that's putting out the emergency content regarding the COVID protections. And they said, we will, again, everything's a black box, but we will more seriously consider a site that is national, that is one place, rather than us trying to figure out where to send people in every jurisdiction. So that's why we invested in a national site. We also saw in our search audit of what sites place high, the only public interest sites that are ranking regularly in the top are the national, like women's law or domestic violence protection sites that do have national level coverage. So obviously they have a lot more users, their audience is more broad, they have a bigger market size and more visitors. So they are, along with CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, like a main hub of where Google is showing to people and where people are starting their justice journeys. So there's something to be said about those sites that already have a national audience and are often the starting point, how to get local resources on there, or how to get more of the tools that are living on local legal aid, statewide law help, or other information sites to those places where people are actually showing up more frequently. I don't think we're going to create a national law help beyond kind of the triage model we have right now at lsc.gov or lawhelp.org, where it's basically a map and go find your org. I don't think we're creating a national content library or forms, tools, things, but maybe that's an issue-specific thing, akin to what CFPB has started to do around debt and housing, building out more guides at the national level, and just the visitor usages are so high there. Whether we can link people coming from CFPB then to a local group beyond that. But yeah, and this is just an open community conversation about how we deal with a reality where national sites are always going to be more highly trafficked and place higher.
And if I could add, as far as lawhelp.org, we have content articles on our national law help site that get a lot of traffic. And we're also looking at ways to leverage what we think of as like evergreen content, that's national in scope, it's not jurisdiction specific, and kind of make that as authoritative as we can. So when Google looks at that, we know that that's been written by subject matter experts. We know it's been vetted. We know it's jurisdiction agnostic. And so it's, like how can we get that out there and make it show up as a how-to, as an FAQ? So that's one thing we're looking into as well.
Sally, I was wondering if, since you launched your Spanish portal or your Spanish mirrored site, have you seen a massive increase in international users? And when you compile data, do you weed those out? Or do you count them as your users as well?
No, we haven't seen, I think it is like, over 90% on our Spanish site, which I will say it doesn't get a ton of traffic. It's not a new site, but it is newly usable. You know, we have newly translated all of our content so that it is a true mirror site. And yeah, over 90% of our users are from Georgia. So, so just to answer that, no.
On the topic of jurisdiction, I'm curious whether there's been any discussion or exploration around developing a schema markup for jurisdiction, like the community arriving at something that people just start using and then presenting it to Google and saying, hey, a lot of folks are using this piece of markup to indicate the jurisdiction of their legal content.
Yeah, so Sam, you can comment on how you've been doing that markup. There are, schema.org is a huge library of terms. So I think administrative area is the variable or the schema term that we've been using to then define. Borrowing from the elections and voting spaces, they invested a lot in creating ID markers. What's the acronym for it? OCD?
CDIDs.
Yes, to distinguish, at least in the US context. I don't know if it's beyond the US.
Actually, I think it did expand beyond the U.S. I haven't followed the project in a while, but it's Open Civic Data Division Identifiers. Open Civic Data Division Identifiers, which is basically like a human-readable chunk of text that is sort of reducible back to almost the country. So you can essentially identify a very localized place and find out, you know, what larger geographic area it falls into, what state it falls into, all the way back out to the US. And I think there is a canonical set of them for the US, and I think they did expand internationally as well.
So for Find My Court, are you using a certain schema markup term to say which jurisdiction this court applies to?
We do have, we overloaded administrative area, and that was to define the geographic areas for, if it's districts and circuits, you could define those areas and also include the shapefiles within them if you have them. There is some identifier for a particular state as well, so.
Yeah, and on the law help side, we're trying to best use like the area served thing, especially with organizations. Because, you know, in law help, you can say an organization serves these counties or serves these zip codes. One thing, you know, and as Sally pointed out, 90% of Georgia legal aid users come from the state of Georgia. So, you know, we're not facing a big issue of site users coming in from out of state. And, you know, like there are out of state users, but they're a very small percentage. You know, so, you know, we're trying to grapple with, you know, like how do we best serve the people looking for jurisdictional specific things? And I think, you know, this is personal opinion, not based on research, but people don't search for, you know, divorce in the 13th Judicial Circuit of Florida. They search for Hillsborough County divorce or Pinellas County divorce. Something that's familiar to them. So we have to be careful about what information that we feed to schema. Do we be hyper-specific or do we be more generic? You know, where do we draw that line, and what are users actually looking for, you know, in terms of, you know, jurisdiction, and do they know that jurisdiction matters? You know, is another big question. Are they just searching for divorce near me? You know, or are they searching for like, wait, I'm in Georgia, I'm in Fulton County, I need to Google Fulton County divorce rules. You know, like consumers may or may not think that far in advance or have that level of legal knowledge to think that way.
Just one enhanced feature I've seen on, I think it's beta testing of search results. I haven't seen it consistently. It is for most landlord queries, funnily enough, that Google underneath, all right, so let's say I type in like how to evict a tenant, press search. The results page has my search query at the top, but then it has buttons underneath, blue. Do you mean in Pennsylvania? Do you mean in California? It has a jurisdiction selection, probably based on my IP or recent searches, and then lets me click that. So Google is advocating for me to be jurisdiction sensitive there, but I don't think that's universal. That's something that we could teach the Google search team about, what queries they should be showing those jurisdiction choices for. Yeah, I think Charlotte, you've had your hand up for a while. Oh, and I think we're almost at time, so Charlotte, sorry.
I'll make it real quick. So I am sorry if this was answered and I missed it. I was curious what pages or page schema was applied to.
So on Law Help,
On any of the sites, just on our site, we just did it on the homepage and saw interesting changes, but I wasn't sure if there were multiple pages, especially with the jurisdiction conversation.
yeah, so schema.org, if you have a Law Help system site, it should be applied to every page. Content pages or content portals, we're still working on a good way to flesh that out. But on resources, subtopic pages, topic pages, like on a topic page, that pulls in the topic and then all of the subtopics that you've chosen as children of that topic and feeds them into the schema.org structure and says, this is about, housing, it's also about eviction, it's also about, like A, B, C, D, whatever you've chosen there. And it feeds in the NISME code as well as a reference to the NISME schema and the description that you've put in of that subtopic to go along with it as well. And we kind of took that approach as we need to give Google, we can't just give it the NISME code because Google may or may not know, hey, this is a thing that exists. So we're going to feed it the name, we're going to feed it the description, we're going to feed it the code, we're going to feed it where to go get that, from NISME and all of those things. So it's like more is more approach there.
And I will say that we've done on our legal FAQ site, the eviction emergency moratoria, we put FAQ and how to markup on every page. And that was just built in, our developer custom built the site, but it was built directly for, like our whole goal with the site was we want these things to show up on Google search results. So we built in with FAQ and how to from the start. And we've seen good results. I think we're at time, so thank you so much. We'll hang out. Thanks for coming.